Vienna, 1907. Just as the imperial waltz echoed through Hofburg's marble halls and the chandeliers cast gold over the polished floors. The Archduchess's winter ball had drawn every titled name from the empire and some who, in truth, had no business being there. One of them stood near the eastern gallery, where the scent of fir trees and pine wax lingered from the Christmas festivities, watching a young woman in blue satin curtsy before an aging countess. Darian Whitlow should not have been in that room. Not in a borrowed uniform, not with a name stitched onto his breast that wasn't his own. But he had made a promise to his dying uncle, a colonel in the Imperial and Royal Army, to deliver a sealed letter to the Minister of War, and the only way past the guards that evening was in full dress. He had expected to slip in, deliver the letter, and disappear. He had not expected her. Barretta Elwood. The hostess had called out, presenting the girl to a circle of diplomats. Barretta. The name struck him. Unusual, unpolished for a court girl. She smiled too honestly, bowed too quickly. Not careless, just real. Her gloved fingers brushed a passing officer's sleeve, and Darian caught the hesitation in her touch. She belonged to no one. He could see it, though half the room clearly wanted to change that. He should have left then, but he didn't. Lieutenant, someone called behind him. Darian turned, stiffening. Yes. A steward held out a silver tray. A note for you, sir. He frowned at the folded parchment. The seal was unbroken. It bore the crest of General Hartlieb, the man who had died in his arms 12 nights before. His hand trembled as he took it. Not now. Not here. What regiment? A voice asked beside him. He looked up. Barretta stood there, a glass of elderflower cordial in her hand, her eyes not on the paper, but on his face. The 49th, he said too quickly, his accent slipping. She tilted her head. My cousin's in the 49th. You don't sound like him. Darian forced a grin. I'm new. Her gaze didn't soften. You're not Austrian. No. But you wear the uniform. I do. A violinist struck the opening notes of a Strauss waltz. The crowd began to swirl. Barretta set her glass down. Come with me, she said. He blinked. What? You don't belong here, she said plainly. And neither do I. But I know where to hide. She didn't wait for him to follow. But he did. Through a side corridor flanked with busts of long dead emperors. Up a narrow staircase. Through a door that creaked with disuse. They emerged onto a narrow terrace dusted with snow, overlooking the city. She leaned against the balustrade, her breath puffing clouds in the frozen air. Darian hesitated. Why'd you bring me here? She looked up at the stars. Because you looked like you needed somewhere to breathe. He stepped beside her, the cold stone biting through his boots. And you? I don't dance, she said simply. He laughed. You're at the imperial ball. And I hate it. She turned toward him then. Her cheeks flushed from the cold, or maybe from something else. Her eyes sharp, unafraid. I'm supposed to marry a man I've spoken to twice, she said. He's 60. Owns half of Bohemia. My family needs his money. Darian's breath caught. She didn't seem to want pity. She said it like a fact. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be. I'm not doing it. That surprised him. You have a choice? No, she said. But I have a plan. Then, for the first time, she smiled. And it was glorious. He looked at her too long. The curve of her mouth, the bravery in it. He didn't even realize he'd leaned in. Their lips touched barely. A mistake. A breath. No more than a second. But it was enough. She pulled back, blinking fast. I didn't mean to, he began. I know, she said. But her cheeks were red now for a different reason. He stepped away. Forgive me. She was quiet, then nodded once. It's all right. But it wasn't. Something had shifted between them. It hung in the air like frost waiting to melt. The moment broke when the door behind them opened. Barretta, a voice hissed. Where have you gone? It was a maid. Young, frightened. Barretta turned without hesitation. I'm here. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of Darian. Who is? No one, Barretta said quickly. But her voice cracked. Barretta slipped past Darian, brushing his arm. Her gloved fingers lingered just a second too long. He watched her disappear into shadow. He should have left Vienna that night. Delivered the letter. Returned to America. But he didn't. Because she had looked back at him once, just before vanishing down the staircase. And Darian never forgot the look in her eyes. The next morning, the fog over Vienna settled low and pale, muffling the clatter of hooves in the Ringstrasse and softening the sharp angles of the city's Baroque facades. Darian stood on the Karlsplatz bridge, coat collar upturned, letter still undelivered in the inner pocket of his uniform jacket. The borrowed insignia weighed more heavily than the cold. The night had not let him sleep. He had replayed her expression Barretta's as she turned away, a flicker of something unspoken in her eyes. Not fear, not regret, something more complicated. It had rooted itself in him. He had not come to Vienna to lose himself in the gaze of a woman with no future to offer him. And yet, he could not leave. By mid-morning, he returned the uniform to the pension house where his uncle had died, folded it with care, and took his uncle's worn satchel instead. It still smelled faintly of pipe smoke and ink. The letter inside was addressed in a trembling hand to Minister von Heller, stamped with the dwindling pride of a man who had served through 2 campaigns and watched the empire shift beneath his boots. Darian approached the Ministry of War's side entrance, prepared to slip the letter to a clerk and disappear. But the clerk, a tall man with thinning hair, squinted at the seal and waved him to wait. Within moments, a man in a long gray coat emerged from within, his posture crisp but not unkind. "You are the colonel's nephew?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," Darian replied. "He passed recently. I was with him." The man nodded once and took the letter. He was respected. That should have been the end. Yet the man glanced over his shoulder and then, unexpectedly, said, "The Archduchess's household is seeking a temporary translator. French and English. If you are staying in the city." Darian hesitated. "I wasn't planning to, but you speak both well. I was raised in Boston. My mother was Parisian." The man gave a tight nod. "Report to the Hofburg's Eastern offices tomorrow. Ask for Frau Kessler. You'll be screened." Darian murmured his thanks, uncertain whether to be relieved or alarmed at this new entanglement. But as he stepped back into the street, he realized he was already thinking of blue satin and snow-dusted terraces. Barretta stood in a cramped music room on the 3rd floor of the Hofburg later that day, arms crossed as her aunt paced with muffled fury. "You were gone for nearly 20 minutes. The older woman hissed. "Do you know how many inquiries I had to deflect?" Barretta kept her voice even. "I needed air. You're not a child anymore. You can't flit off on whims. You are being watched. Carefully. I'm aware." "No, you are not. The Count of Moravia asked after you." Barretta's mouth tightened. "He is a man of land. He can secure your brother's schooling, your father's debts." Barretta turned toward the window. "And I am the coin. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not. I'm being accurate." The older woman's eyes narrowed. "You're not clever enough to walk both lines, Barretta. You either play your part or you get discarded." The door clicked shut behind her, and Barretta didn't move until the silence grew too sharp to bear. She reached for the small spinet in the corner and pressed a tentative chord. It was slightly out of tune. She played anyway. The next morning, Darian stood outside the Hofburg's eastern wing, now dressed in a modest brown coat and pressed wool trousers. The snow had hardened into slush that clung to his boots. Inside, Frau Kessler barely looked up as he entered. "Name? Darian Whitlow. Purpose? I'm to be screened for a translator position." She shuffled a few papers, then gestured to a bench. "Wait there." He did. After nearly an hour, a younger clerk summoned him into a narrow office lined with shelves of official records and maps. The man behind the desk was thin, with a scholar's stoop and a pince-nez perched precariously on his nose. "Translate this," the examiner said, sliding across a dispatch from North Africa. Darian read it, then answered in fluent German. The man didn't smile, but he underlined something in his ledger. "You'll assist with correspondence for the Archduchess's foreign guests. You'll also accompany her aides on occasion if they require translation." Darian nodded. As he turned to leave, the examiner added, "You'll report to Fräulein Elwood for your first assignment. She is overseeing the visiting delegation from Brittany." Salon 3. Darian froze, just for a moment. Then he said, "Understood." He found the salon easily a high-ceilinged chamber with a painted coffered dome and tall windows that overlooked the Innenstadt. Inside, Barretta stood beside a long table scattered with documents and small silver dishes of sugared almonds. She wore a high-collared gown of dark plum, her hair pinned more severely than before. She looked up when he entered, and her hand stilled on the page. "You," she said quietly. He inclined his head. "Apparently, I work for you now." She gestured to the opposite chair. "Sit." He did. Barretta's voice was even, formal. "We're reviewing a trade agreement draft. You're to translate the French version into English for the delegation's secretary. Darian nodded and pulled the paper toward him, but her gaze lingered on him longer than necessary. You applied for this? She asked. I was offered the post yesterday. Curious timing. It seems Vienna wants to keep me. Barretta looked down at her own papers. That may not be wise. He didn't answer. The scratch of the pen on parchment was the only sound for a moment. Then she said, What did you think would happen after the terrace? I didn't think. She glanced at him, sharp. No, you didn't. Darian set his pen down. But I haven't forgotten it. She stood abruptly, walking to the window. The light caught on the fine pins in her hair. My aunt is pressing the count, she said without turning. There's little time. Then we waste none. She looked back at him, eyes unreadable. He rose slowly and crossed to her. Left sufficient distance. But not much. If you're planning to run, he said, I can help. I'm not. Then what? Barretta folded her arms. I'm going to change the terms. How? Her gaze didn't waver. By making myself indispensable. Too visible to be bartered. Too useful to be caged. He studied her face. You always speak like that. Only when I mean it. He nodded once. Then tell me what to do. Her lips parted slightly, not in surprise, but in consideration. I need someone who listens, she said. Who doesn't vanish when it gets hard. Darian didn't flinch. I'm still here. Barretta regarded him for a long moment. Then she gave a single, precise nod. Good, she said. Then begin again. And this time, don't make mistakes. The snow had turned to a fine, gritty rain by the time Darian left the Hofburg that evening, slipping through the side gate as the gas lamps flared to life. The wide avenues of Vienna were slick with melt, the air heavy with coal smoke and wet horsehair. He walked slowly past shuttered cafes and narrow shops, his thoughts tangled in a dozen directions. He hadn't expected to be given a second chance. Barretta had measured him not with softness, but with deliberation, as though weighing the cost of allowing him near her orbit. He knew better than to mistake that for trust. But it was something. The next morning, he was sent to the archives with a stack of diplomatic dispatches to catalog for translation. The chamber was dim and smelled of parchment and wax, lined with iron cabinets and a single-tiled stove. Hours passed without interruption, save for the occasional rustle of paper or the ticking of the wall clock. He was half bent over a French naval report when the door creaked. Barretta stepped inside, her gloves damp from the rain. She didn't speak at first, merely placed a folder on the desk beside him. I need a transcription of the Lithuanian memorandum, in German and English, by tomorrow. He took the folder. Understood. She didn't move to leave. Instead, she walked to one of the cabinets and ran her fingers lightly along the nameplates. Have you ever been to the countryside? She asked, not looking at him. He straightened. Once. Near Graz. She opened a drawer at random, then closed it again. I used to ride every morning before breakfast. My father kept a small estate south of Linz. The fields were always damp with mist, even in summer. Darian watched her carefully. I would race my brother to the river, she continued. He always let me win, though I pretended not to know. She glanced at him then, her expression unreadable. He died during the typhoid last year. I'm sorry. She nodded once. He was the only one who ever said no to my father and lived to see the next morning. He didn't ask what that meant. She wasn't offering pain for sympathy, only truth. I can ride, he said quietly. Barretta turned to him. If you ever needed someone to go with you. Away from the city. Even for a day. Her brow lifted slightly. And what would you do on a horse, Lieutenant? I try not to fall off. The faintest sound escaped her, then a laugh, low and unexpected. You may not be suited for noble rebellion, she said. I wasn't raised for it. She stepped closer to the desk, resting her gloved hands lightly on the edge. I've arranged to review the delegation's estate visit next week. There's a carriage leaving Thursday morning for the wine district. I'll need someone to interpret trade terminology. Is that a request? It's an order, she said, but her voice had softened. Darian nodded. Then I'll obey it. Barretta stepped back and turned toward the door, pausing only once. We're something warmer. I won't hold the reins for you. The day of the estate visit arrived gray and cold, the hills outside Vienna dusted in sleet and rimmed with bare vines. The carriage rocked gently over rutted tracks, its oilcloth curtains drawn against the wind. Barretta sat poised beside him, her hat pinned low, a fur-lined cloak drawn tight around her shoulders. They passed through quiet villages where children watched from windows and men in wool coats leaned against barrels, smoking in silence. Darian translated questions and answers between the French landholder and the Hungarian interpreter without error, but his focus kept drifting to the curve of Barretta's profile. She was different here, less guarded, more alert. She asked questions the others didn't think to pose, about yield and irrigation, about the workers' quarters and the books kept on wages. The landowner chuckled at her persistence, but answered her with respect. As they walked the rows of dormant vines, her boots crunching over wet gravel, she turned to him. My father owns no land. Only debts. I've spent years learning how to talk like someone who does. You don't sound like anyone else at court, Darian said. I don't try to. They stopped at a low wall overlooking a frozen creek. The others had moved ahead. Barretta leaned against the stone and drew off one glove. Her fingers were pale, the nails neatly trimmed. I know what I want now, she said without prompting. And I know how to get it. But it will require people who don't flinch. He studied her face. You think I won't? I think you already haven't. The silence between them was taut, but not uncomfortable. I kissed you by mistake, he said quietly. But everything since has been deliberate. Barretta didn't look away. I remember the way you looked at me that night, he continued. And every moment since, I've wondered if I deserved it. She exhaled slowly. You didn't, she said. But you might. She reached up then, not with certainty, but with care, and touched his cheek with the back of her bare hand. The wind stirred her veil, and for a moment, there was only the sound of the creek below and the distant murmur of the others. Then she stepped back. Come, she said. We're not finished. And though she didn't take his hand, she walked beside him all the way down the hill. 3 days after the estate visit, Barretta stood at the edge of the winter garden, her arms folded tight beneath her cloak as she watched the gardeners scrape frost from the marble basins with chipped tools. The air was sharp with the scent of wet earth and iron. Ivy, stripped of leaves, clung to the stone lattice overhead. From the eastern corridor, the sound of footsteps approached measured, not hurried. Darian stopped just behind her. She didn't turn. Frau Kessler assigned me to the Hungarian delegation this morning, he said. They want to renegotiate the railway bonds. Barretta's voice was quiet. She told me. He waited. The silence between them was brittle. She finally said, There's talk of stationing me in Trieste this spring. As a liaison. His brow furrowed. That's a maritime post. I requested it. He stepped beside her, hands tucked in his coat. Why? Because it places me in a position to manage foreign trade portfolios. And because no one in Trieste has a title to offer me in exchange for my name. Her breath fogged the air. I thought you were trying to stay visible. Barretta turned then. I am. But visibility only matters if you can move freely. In Vienna, I'm a niece. In Trieste, I'm an asset. He searched her expression. You won't be safer. You'll just be farther. She raised her chin. I'll be useful. They stood in the silence of the frozen garden, the only sound the hiss of the snow melt dripping from the terracotta gutters above. He said, If you go, I'll follow. Her eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in slow comprehension. You'd leave the capital? I have nothing binding me here. Not anymore. Barretta looked at him fully now. And what would you do in Trieste? Translate fishing permits. Whatever you need done. She didn't respond at first. Then, slowly, she turned away again, drawing her glove off finger by finger. My aunt believes my delay means I'm softening. She's wrong. Her thumb brushed over a bit of frost clinging to the balustrade. I've accepted a meeting with the Count of Moravia tomorrow. She insisted. Darian's jaw tensed. She glanced at him, catching the shift in his posture. I'm not going to accept him, but I need him to believe I might. He's powerful enough that if he withdraws interest publicly, my aunt will lose standing. She'll stop attempting to trade me if she's embarrassed. Darian nodded once. Barretta added, I'll need someone in the salon during the meeting, quietly, in case he forgets his manners. I won't be noticed, Darian said. I'm counting on that. The next afternoon, Darian stood behind a lacquered screen in the Archduchess's receiving salon, a tray of diplomatic notes in hand, and his coat exchanged for a stiff-collared linen shirt and waistcoat. Barretta sat across from the Count, her posture deliberate, her tone light. The Count was broad-shouldered, his temples gray, and his fingers heavy with rings. His laugh came easily. Too easily. Darian's gaze never left him. Barretta asked questions that sounded idle, but were anything but. How long he planned to remain in Vienna, whether he had many dependents, what his intentions were for the northern estates. Each reply revealed more than the Count intended. When he finally rose, bowing with a flourish, he pressed her hand longer than was necessary. "You are sharper than they say," he murmured. Barretta's smile was brief. Then they weren't listening. Once the salon emptied, she didn't rise from her seat. Darian stepped forward, but not too close. "He'll withdraw," she said. "He doesn't like women who test him, especially not with real questions." "Did he say anything inappropriate?" "No, but he thought about it." Darian offered her a folded note. "Frau Kessler sent this. You're expected at the Foreign Office tomorrow." Barretta unfolded it and scanned the contents. Her brow furrowed. "They've approved my Trieste assignment." Darian waited. She folded the note again and looked up at him. "There's a train Friday morning. 5:30. No escort. I'll be there." Barretta rose, smoothing her skirt. "There won't be a carriage. It's not an official post, just a provisional assignment." He gave a single nod. "I'll walk." Her eyes lingered on his face. "You're certain?" "I've already chosen." She reached for her gloves, then hesitated. "You kissed me by mistake," she said. "But you stayed with intention." He didn't answer. She took one slow step toward him, then another, until only the narrow hem of her skirt separated them. Her voice was low. "Don't fall behind on the platform." "I won't." She stepped past him then, her shoulder brushing his lightly. Darian remained in the salon long after the door shut behind her, the scent of lavender and ink still suspended in the air.